We're in the Tower of London, and a 67-year-old woman is about to be executed. But this wasn't some big public show meant to scare everyone. This was personal. It was a cruel, calculated move that shocked even the most hardcore people of the time. To do the job, they sent a literal boy, an inexperienced executioner who had zero idea what he was doing. And what happened next was insane. This wasn't an execution, it was a total butchering. The victim was Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury. A woman with royal blood, once a total powerhouse in the Tudor court, was literally chased and hacked to death in a final, terrifying display of a king's paranoia. This is the story of her last moments, a story that shows just how crazy Henry VIII's tyranny really was. It took 11 swings of an axe to kill this 67-year-old countess. And get this, she wasn't a traitor. She was a niece to 2 different kings and one of the most respected noblewomen in all of England. But in the paranoid world of Henry VIII, that was a death sentence. She was condemned without a trial, her entire fate decided by a furious king and the schemers around him. Today, we're uncovering the insane end of Margaret Pole, a woman hacked to death on the scaffold in what became the Tudor era's most brutal display of power. So to understand how crazy this execution was, you need to know who Margaret Pole actually was. She wasn't just some random noble, she was a Plantagenet. That's the family that ruled England for over 300 years. Her uncles were literally kings, Edward IV and Richard III. And in Tudor England, your bloodline was everything. That royal blood made her super important, but also put a giant target on her back. The first Tudor king, Henry VII, saw anyone like her as a threat to his new kingdom. So he married her off to some loyal knight who wasn't a big deal. It was a classic move to shut down her power, and for a while, it totally worked. But when Henry VIII became king in 1509, Margaret's life completely flipped. The new king was married to Catherine of Aragon, who was great friends with Margaret. Henry, feeling super confident, seemed to want to fix his dad's mistakes. He gave Margaret all her family's land back, and, in a huge move, made her Countess of Salisbury in her own right. This was basically unheard of for a woman back then, making her one of only 2 women in the entire country to hold a title like that on her own. She became insanely rich. We're talking estates in 17 counties, making her the 5th richest peer in all of England. Her success hit its peak when she was made royal governess to the king's daughter, Princess Mary. They formed a super tight bond, and Margaret was like a second mother to her. She was at the center of everything. Friends with the Queen, crazy wealthy, and a living piece of England's royal history. It seemed like nothing could touch her, but a massive storm was coming that would destroy everything. So everything was going great until Henry VIII decided he needed a son. His wife, Queen Catherine, hadn't given him one, and he was now obsessed with Anne Boleyn. His obsession led him to do something nobody thought was possible. He broke up with the entire Catholic Church, made his own church, and made himself the boss. This whole thing split the entire kingdom in 2. This was a total disaster for Margaret. She was super religious and best friends with both Queen Catherine and Princess Mary. She stayed loyal to them even after Mary was called illegitimate and had her title taken away. In 1533, Margaret straight up defied the king when he told her to hand over Mary's jewels. When Mary's staff was fired, Margaret even offered to keep working for her and pay for it herself. The king was furious and supposedly called her a fool of no experience. Her loyalty was a problem, but the real danger was her son, Reginald Pole. Reginald was a top churchman and used to be one of the king's favorites. But from the safety of Europe, He started writing insane diss tracts about the king, destroying him for the divorce and leaving the church. To make it worse, the Pope then made Reginald a cardinal, showing everyone the Vatican had his back. For Henry, this was the ultimate betrayal. He couldn't get to Reginald, so he did the next best thing. He went after his entire family back in England. The Poles were the perfect targets. They had royal blood and were super Catholic, and the king's ruthless right-hand man, Thomas Cromwell, started plotting to take them all down for good. And in November 1538, everything fell apart. In a massive surprise sweep, Margaret's oldest son, Henry Pole, was arrested for treason. Her other son, Geoffrey, was also arrested and interrogated, almost definitely tortured. He was the one who cracked, feeding Cromwell all the fake evidence he needed to destroy his own family. Margaret, now 65, was put under house arrest. But when they interrogated Margaret, she was an absolute rock. The guy questioning her literally wrote to Cromwell saying she was more like a strong and constant man than a woman because she would not break. She kept saying she was innocent and loyal. But it didn't matter. Her fate was already decided. In January 1539, her son Henry was executed. And this is where it gets crazy. To finally seal her fate, Cromwell walks into Parliament holding this silk shirt. He claims he found it in her stuff, and it had a symbol used by rebels embroidered on it. He showed it off as undeniable proof that she was plotting against the king. We still don't know if the shirt was really hers or if Cromwell planted it, but it worked perfectly. And based on just this one shirt, Margaret Pole was condemned to death. They used a crazy legal loophole called a Bill of Attainder that let them sentence her without ever giving her a trial. It was the ultimate power move. They took her titles, seized her lands, and threw her in the Tower of London. For over 2 years, this super-rich, powerful countess was left to rot in a freezing cold cell with her young grandson. And in a totally bizarre move, the king was still paying for her food and even new clothes, just months before he had her killed. She was a pawn. Then, in the spring of 1541, another small rebellion connected to her family started up. The king's patience was gone. Okay, it's May 27th, 1541. The head of the tower walks into her cell and tells her, "You have 1 hour to live." According to an ambassador, she thought the news was very strange, since she had no idea what crime she was even accused of. To the very end, she said she was innocent. There's even a legend that she carved this poem into her cell wall. "For traitors on the block should die. I am no traitor. No, not I. My faithfulness stands fast, and so, towards the block I shall not go." Basically, she was saying, I'm not a traitor, and I'm not dying like one. Because she was a noble, her execution was private, with only about 150 people watching. There was no big scaffold, just a low wooden block. And to make things a billion times worse, the tower's expert executioner was out of town. So they grabbed a replacement who was just a wretched and blundering youth. A clumsy teenage boy who had no idea what he was doing, was handed an axe and told to execute a 67-year-old woman. What happened next is one of the most messed up things I have ever read. Margaret completely refused to put her head on the block. She basically said, "That's for traitors, and I'm not a traitor. If you want my head, you have to come and get it." So this terrified kid swings the axe, and he misses. He hits her in the shoulder, creating this horrible wound. The old woman is now hurt and struggling, and the kid starts panicking and just hacking at her head and shoulders over and over again. He turned a state execution into a long, bloody mess. It took 10, maybe 11, brutal swings to finally get her head off. He literally hacked her to pieces. The crowd just watched, totally stunned. Some people say she actually ran from the executioner who chased her around the block. That part isn't true, but the reality is somehow even worse. A 67-year-old woman refusing to give in, being butchered to death by a clumsy kid because a king wanted revenge from miles away. The news of this execution exploded across Europe. Everyone thought it was one of the cruelest things a king had ever done. An ambassador wrote that it was completely pointless. Since she was so old, she would have died soon anyway. Her death was exactly what it looked like, a mean, vengeful show of power. Her body was buried with no ceremony in the Tower's chapel, in the same ground as other victims of Henry's rage, including 2 of his own wives. When her son, Cardinal Reginald Pole, heard how his mother died, he declared that he was proud to call himself the son of a martyr. He was right. For centuries, people remembered Margaret as a victim of a tyrant and a hero of the Catholic faith. And here's the ultimate comeback. In 1886, the Catholic Church, the one Henry tried to destroy, officially made her the Blessed Margaret Pole, a martyr for her faith. Her life was incredible. She survived the end of her dynasty, became one of the most powerful women in England, and stuck to her beliefs. But her death, those 11 botched swings of an axe, is why she's remembered as the ultimate symbol of Henry VIII's tyranny. Margaret Pole's story is completely insane, and it shows you just how quickly you could go from being rich and powerful to being hunted by a paranoid king. Her execution is still one of the most savage and unjust things Henry VIII ever did. If you think this story is as crazy as I do, smash that like button and subscribe for more insane moments from history. And let me know in the comments what insane story we should cover next. Thanks for watching.